The first thing you learn when you're living on the streets is silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that hums beneath the city's noise. It's a silence filled with absence. No one calls your name anymore. No one expects you to show up anywhere. You start to fade around the edges until even your reflection in a puddle looks like a stranger. My name is Ethan Ward. 2 years ago, I was a doctor, not a great one, not terrible either. I ran a small clinic in Worcester, Massachusetts. Stitched up factory workers, checked the lungs of old men, prescribed antibiotics I couldn't afford myself. I had a house, a wife, and a sense of worth. Now, I sleep under a bridge on the outskirts of Boston, wrapped in a blanket that smells like mildew and rain. Every night, the river talks. It slaps the stones beneath the overpass and drags trash along its banks, plastic bottles, lost shoes, a rusted bicycle frame. The sound is strangely comforting. It reminds me that movement still exists, even if I've stopped. I lost everything because of a name I didn't know, a patient named Carla Mendez. She came in one night with chest pain and shortness of breath. I did what protocol demanded. Ran tests, ordered an ECG, gave her nitroglycerin. 2 hours later, she was dead. They said I missed a tear in her aorta. The lawsuit came fast and loud. Her husband's lawyer painted me as negligent, careless, heartless. My malpractice insurance didn't cover the full claim. The clinic went first, then the house. And Lydia, my wife, she left not long after the hearing. Said she couldn't bear the stares, the whispers at the grocery store, the feeling of being attached to failure. She found comfort with Graham Ellis, a pharmaceutical rep who used to buy me dinner when I still had a clinic. I remember his smile at the trial, the faint apology in his eyes. I remember Lydia's perfume when she packed her suitcase. I remember not fighting it. Now I live among the forgotten, the men who used to be something. Jonas used to be a firefighter. Lost his family in a blaze that started in his own house. There's Danny, who once managed a hardware store before opioids turned him into a ghost. And Lou, who claims he wrote songs for famous people once, though no one's sure if that's true. Out here, truth and lies bleed into each other until neither matters. Jonas took me under his wing when I first arrived at the bridge. He showed me where to find food, how to layer newspapers inside your coat to trap heat, how to spot danger before it spots you. You can lose everything but not your soul, he said once, his voice gravelly from years of smoke. That's the last line between you and the void. Every morning, I wake before dawn. The sky turns bruised purple before the sun decides to rise. I watch the traffic crawl across the overpass, headlights blinking like fireflies. I wonder if any of those drivers glance down, if they ever notice us. Maybe they do, and maybe they prefer to think we're part of the scenery. It's easier that way. Sometimes I think about walking into a hospital again, just to breathe the sterile air, to hear the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. But then I remember the way the nurses looked at me after the verdict, pity mixed with judgment, and I stay where I am. There's a soup kitchen a few blocks down that opens on Thursdays. Jonas and I line up early, trading jokes to pass the time. You ever think of writing your story, Doc? He asked me once, stirring his coffee made from instant powder. People love redemption tales. Who'd believe it? I reply, a doctor turned beggar? They'd think it's fiction. He laughs, the sound deep and cracked. Then, make it fiction. Sometimes it's the only way to tell the truth. That night, I lie awake under the bridge, watching the condensation rise from my breath. A rat scurries near my blanket, and I don't bother to move. The moon cuts through the clouds, pale and distant. I think of Lydia's face the last time I saw her, the way she didn't look back when she shut the car door. It's strange how quickly life can collapse. One decision, one diagnosis, and everything you thought was solid becomes air. I used to believe that good men were spared the worst fates, that doing right counted for something. Now I know better. The universe doesn't keep score. Still, every morning, I check my pulse before getting up. Old habit. Maybe it's my way of confirming I'm still part of the living. Maybe it's proof that I haven't given up completely. Sometimes I dream of my old office, the jar of tongue depressors, the clink of my stethoscope, the soft knock of Lydia's hand on the door. But the dream always ends the same way, with silence. And in that silence, I hear Jonas's voice from earlier in the night. Don't lose your soul. The truth is, I don't know if I still have one. But as the first light cuts across the city skyline, touching the bridge's steel ribs with gold, I whisper to myself, not yet. Tomorrow might be the same. Or it might not. I've learned that change doesn't announce itself. It sneaks up quietly, in the shape of a stranger, a letter, or maybe just a name you haven't heard in years. And though I don't know it yet, my life is about to change again. All it will take is one man in an overcoat who somehow knows my name. The morning it happened was colder than usual, the kind of cold that makes the air feel sharp enough to cut skin. My fingers were numb inside a pair of torn gloves as I dug through the dumpster behind a seafood restaurant near the harbor. Tuesdays were decent. The place dumped its unsold bread and vegetables before delivery day. I'd gotten used to the rhythm of the city's waste, when to scavenge, when to hide, when to move on. I remember thinking how absurd it was. Once I'd worn latex gloves to perform procedures. Now I wore trash bags around my shoes to keep them dry. Life had a dark sense of humor. Then I heard it, a voice that didn't belong. Dr. Ethan Ward? I froze. It had been 2 years since anyone had called me that. Most folks on the street knew me as Doc or Ward, but hearing the full title, spoken cleanly and with authority, hit me like a punch. I turned around slowly. He was tall, maybe late 50s, wearing a charcoal overcoat that looked like it cost more than every car parked on that block combined. His shoes gleamed, untouched by the grime that clung to everything here. The wind caught his coat, making it flare slightly as he stepped closer. Who's asking? I said, instinctively wary. My name is Edward Blackwell, he replied, his tone clipped but not unkind. I'm an attorney representing the estate of the late Reginald Ashford. The name stirred something faint, like a half-remembered song. Ashford. My mother's cousin, I thought vaguely, a recluse who'd lived somewhere in New York, the kind of man family mentioned only at funerals. I hadn't seen him since I was 10. Blackwell reached into his briefcase and withdrew an envelope sealed with a wax crest. He held it out like an offering. I've been looking for you for weeks, he said. May I? I didn't move. The last person who'd offered me something that formal was a process server with my eviction papers. I think you have the wrong man, I said finally. He studied me, really studied me, eyes calm and analytical. You're Ethan Michael Ward, born June 12, 1980, Worcester General? Used to be, I muttered. He nodded slightly, as though I'd confirmed a fact already known. Then this belongs to you. I took the envelope hesitantly. My fingers were dirty, trembling a little as I broke the seal. Inside was a single page, printed on thick cream paper, with an embossed crest at the top, a lion, its paw resting on a shield. I read the first line aloud, barely believing it. I, Reginald Arthur Ashford, being of sound mind and memory, do hereby declare Dr. Ethan Michael Ward the sole heir to my estate. My throat tightened. I read it again, certain I'd misread. Is this a joke? I asked, my voice rough. No joke, Blackwell said calmly. Mr. Ashford passed 3 weeks ago. His will named you as his sole beneficiary. The estate's value is substantial, approximately $53 million. I laughed, not out of joy, but disbelief. The sound came out harsh, brittle. 53 million? You've got the wrong Ethan Ward. The Ethan Ward you're looking for doesn't live under a bridge. I assure you this is no mistake, he said, reaching into his coat and showing me identification, a gold embossed card from a New York law firm. He even had notarized credentials with the state bar seal. Everything about him radiated legitimacy. Why me? I asked quietly. I barely knew the man. I can't disclose the reasoning, he replied. Mr. Ashford left specific instructions. You'll understand once you hear his message in person. Message. He nodded. There's a condition to the inheritance. You must travel to New York within 72 hours to hear it formally read. If you fail to appear, the estate passes to the alternate beneficiary. I felt my stomach drop. And who's that? He adjusted his glasses, consulting a note. A woman named Lydia Ellis. My pulse stuttered. Lydia. My ex-wife. The name sliced through me like a blade. Blackwell continued, unaware of the turmoil spreading through my chest. I have transportation arranged. A car can take you to a private terminal tonight. Everything else will be explained upon arrival. I stared at the letter again, at the elegant script spelling my name as though it belonged to someone else. Around us, the wind whipped through the alley, carrying the sour scent of fish and salt. My mind spun with fragments. Lydia's laughter, Graham's smirk, the courtroom's fluorescent lights. I don't understand, I said finally. Why would he leave me anything? I'm nobody. Blackwell's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. Reginald Ashford didn't believe anyone was a nobody. He once told me that every man's worth is only hidden until life tests him. I didn't answer. The street seemed to tilt beneath me, the cold biting deeper than before. The attorney glanced at his watch. I'll return tomorrow morning. Please decide by then. But remember, 72 hours. After that, the will is executed, and Mrs. Ellis inherits everything. He turned and walked away, his polished shoes clicking against the wet pavement until he disappeared into the gray morning. I stood there, letter in hand, the ink already smudging from the drizzle. For a long time, I couldn't move. Then I laughed again, softer this time, almost a whisper. $53 million. Lydia Ellis. A man I hadn't seen in 30 years. It had to be a mistake. It had to be. But as the wind tore through the alley and the letter fluttered in my shaking hands, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life, the one I'd buried beneath concrete and shame, had just been dug up again. And this time, I wasn't sure I wanted to see what came out of the ground. I didn't sleep that night. The city hummed above the bridge as if mocking me, traffic roaring like distant thunder while the cold pressed in from every direction. I turned the letter over and over in my hands until the edges softened with sweat. It looked so absurdly clean, so official, surrounded by the filth that had become my world. $53 million. My mind kept circling the number like a vulture. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. I had no connection to Reginald Ashford beyond a few fading childhood memories. A tall man in a tweed jacket who smelled of cigar smoke and once sent me a model airplane for Christmas. I hadn't even known he was still alive. By dawn, the wind had died down, leaving a brittle quiet under the bridge. Jonas was already awake, feeding scraps of bread to a trio of pigeons. His breath fogged in the cold. His beard rhymed with frost. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Doc," he said, tossing another crumb. "Maybe I have." I handed him the letter. He read slowly, mouthing the words. When he reached the part about the money, he let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "So you're rich now?" "I don't know what I am." He studied me, then folded the paper and gave it back. "You going?" I shrugged. Could be a scam. Could be real. Either way, feels like someone else's story. "Doc, every man's story starts as someone else's until he decides to claim it." I smiled faintly. "You should write fortune cookies." He chuckled, then turned serious. "Listen, you've been down here long enough to know what's real and what's rot. If this is a chance to climb out, even for a bit, take it. Worst that happens, you come back. We'll still be here." His words hit me harder than I expected. For months, this place, this forgotten corner of the city, had been my refuge, my punishment, my hiding place. Leaving felt like betrayal, but staying felt like surrender. I walked with Jonas to the soup line that morning, the envelope tucked in my coat pocket like a live coal. The air smelled of exhaust and wet concrete. When I told a few others about the man in the overcoat, they laughed. Danny clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Tell him I'll take $53 if you're not interested." But Jonas didn't laugh. He watched me with that firefighter's gaze, the kind that saw through smoke and panic. By evening, I'd made up my mind. When Edward Blackwell's black Lincoln pulled up beneath the bridge at sunset, its headlights cut through the mist like searchlights. The man stepped out, crisp and calm as before. "Mr. Ward," he said, "have you decided?" "I'll come," I said quietly. He nodded once. "Pack what you need. We leave at dawn." Pack what I need. The phrase sounded almost ridiculous. My possessions fit into a single torn backpack, a worn photograph of Lydia from better years, a cracked lighter, a half-empty bottle of painkillers I rationed like gold, and an old blanket Jonas had given me last winter. That night, I sat by the fire barrel while the others drifted into sleep. The flames painted the underside of the bridge in trembling gold. Jonas sat beside me, rolling a cigarette with calloused fingers. "Gonna miss your sour coffee, Doc," he said. I laughed softly. "You mean the one we brew from instant grounds and regret?" "The very one." He smiled, but there was something behind his eyes, the kind of sadness that comes from seeing too many people vanish. "You know," he said, "I used to think saving lives meant pulling people out of fires. But sometimes it's about showing them there's still a way out. You did that for me." I shook my head. "You're giving me too much credit." "Maybe. Or maybe you don't give yourself enough." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out, a small, tarnished brass compass. The glass face was scratched, the needle trembling faintly in the firelight. "This belonged to my captain," he said. "Gave it to me after my first rescue. Said it always points home, even when you don't know where that is." I stared at it. "Jonas, I can't take this." "Sure you can. You'll need it more than I do. Don't lose your way, document. When you've got nothing, directions all you've got left." I closed my fingers around the compass. It felt heavy, real, more real than the letter in my pocket. Before dawn, I packed my bag and stood at the edge of the camp. Jonas was still asleep, curled beneath his blanket. I left half my instant coffee and a folded note beside his fire pit. It simply said, "I'll find my way back." When I climbed into the Lincoln, the city was just beginning to stir. Blackwell sat in the front seat, reading something on a tablet. He didn't look up as we pulled away. Through the window, I watched the bridge fade into the fog, a ghost of steel and shadow. For the first time in 2 years, I was heading somewhere with purpose. But even as the skyline shrank behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was leaving a part of myself there, the part that had learned how to survive when everything else had burned away. I looked down at the compass in my hand. The needle quivered, then steadied, pointing north. "Don't lose your way," Jonas had said. I whispered back, "I'll try not to." And as the sun rose over the edge of the city, I couldn't tell if I was being saved or tested. The Lincoln's interior smelled faintly of leather and something citrus, like the kind of cologne you wear to business meetings, not back alleys. The seat was soft, almost too soft. I sank into it awkwardly, clutching my backpack, as though someone might change their mind and throw me out mid-ride. Blackwell didn't speak for the first 20 minutes. He typed quietly on his phone while the driver guided us through Boston's waking streets. Outside, the city yawned to life, commuters hurrying to work, coffee carts steaming, pigeons scattering before buses. It was strange seeing it all from inside warmth again. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured, professional. "There's a private terminal waiting. You'll have time to clean up, eat, and rest before the flight. Mr. Ashford's estate has arranged everything." I nodded, unsure what to say. My reflection in the window startled me, gaunt, hollow-eyed, a man shaped by cold and regret. I looked more like a ghost than someone about to inherit millions. The car pulled into a gated airfield outside the city, where a sleek white jet waited like something out of another life. My heart thudded as I stepped out into the crisp air. A uniformed attendant greeted us, polite but visibly curious. I must have looked like a stray dog being escorted into a palace. Inside the terminal, they gave me clothes, simple but clean, black slacks, a press shirt, even a razor and a towel. I spent nearly half an hour in the shower, scrubbing away months of dirt and despair. When I looked into the mirror afterward, steam curling around my face, I almost didn't recognize the man staring back. Back on the jet, I sat across from Blackwell as the engines whirred to life. He poured coffee into porcelain cups, handed me one, and began to speak. Mr. Ashford, he said, was not an ordinary man. He built his fortune restoring art and antiquities, items thought lost, damaged, or fake. He believed that anything could be redeemed if handled with care. "Even people?" I asked. A faint smile touched his lips. "Especially people." We lifted off, the ground falling away beneath us. For a long while I just watched the world shrink, the gray sprawl of the city, the glitter of the harbor, the river snaking through it all. I hadn't left Massachusetts since my fall. The clouds looked close enough to touch. "Tell me something," I said finally. "Why would a man like Ashford leave his fortune to me?" I barely knew him. Blackwell closed his tablet. He kept a keen eye on his family, even those he never spoke to. "You're his only living relative who's," how did he put it? He searched his memory. "Untainted by greed." I laughed softly. "Untainted? I'm a ruined man, Mr. Blackwell. I've slept in alleys and eaten from dumpsters. If that's purity, the world's in worse shape than I thought." "Perhaps that's exactly why he chose you," he said. "Reginald believed wealth meant nothing unless it could lift someone else from the ground. He called it his final test of character." "Test," I repeated. He didn't elaborate. "You'll know soon enough." The jet climbed higher, sunlight spilling across the cabin. I sipped the coffee, real coffee, smooth and rich. It almost made me dizzy. I thought of Jonas, of his rough laughter and steady hands, of the brass compass in my pocket. He would have loved this absurdity. The doctor turned beggar turned heir. "If you're ever in doubt," he'd said once, "look where you came from. That's the map no one can steal." As we crossed into New York airspace, clouds glowed gold beneath us, and the skyline began to emerge in the distance, spires of glass stabbing the horizon. I pressed my forehead to the window. I used to visit this city for conferences, dinners, medical summits. Now, it felt like another planet. Blackwell handed me a folder. "You'll find orientation details inside, the estate address, contacts, and instructions. When we land, a car will take us directly to Ashford Hall." I flipped through the papers absently, noting the crest embossed at the top of each page, the same lion that sealed the letter. "You know," I said, 2 years ago I thought my life was over. Sometimes I still think it should have been. But this," I gestured around the cabin, "the polished wood, the luxury. It doesn't feel real." He studied me quietly. "Reality, Dr. Ward, is simply what hasn't been taken from you yet. Perhaps this is your chance to reclaim some of it." His words lingered as we began our descent. Below, Manhattan stretched endlessly, a grid of ambition and exhaustion. My pulse quickened. I had no idea what awaited me, but something in my chest, faint and unfamiliar, stirred. Hope maybe, or fear disguised as it. As the wheels touched down, I felt the shift inside me, the kind you feel before an operation begins. The air thick with uncertainty, the silence before the first incision. I wasn't sure if I was the surgeon or the patient this time. When we stepped off the jet, a black sedan waited by the runway. Blackwell gestured toward it. "Welcome back to the living, Dr. Ward." I followed him, the brass compass cold in my pocket. Somewhere deep down, I wondered if I deserved any of this. And as the city swallowed us, I had the distinct feeling that whatever test awaited me at Ashford Hall had already begun. The first glimpse of Ashford Hall was like seeing a fortress dreamt into existence. 6 stories of gray stone and glass rising from the edge of Central Park. It stood apart from the world, aloof and immaculate, its facade catching the late afternoon sun in fractured gold. Iron gates opened silently as our car approached, revealing a courtyard lined with marble statues weathered by time. I stared through the tinted window, unsure whether I was impressed or intimidated. "He lived here alone?" I asked. "For the past 20 years, Blackwell replied. "Staff maintained the property, but few ever saw him. Mr. Ashford valued privacy." That word, privacy, seemed inadequate for what I felt stepping out of the car. The air smelled faintly of cedar and rain. Somewhere inside, a clock chimed, deep and resonant, echoing through the hall like a pulse from another century. The front doors swung open, and we were greeted by a woman in her 60s, sharp-eyed, dressed in black. "Mr. Blackwell," she said with a faint nod. "And this must be Dr. Ward." "Mrs. Havers," the attorney said, "caretaker of the estate." She looked me over, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Ashford spoke of you often in his last weeks," she said. "He said you reminded him of someone." "Who?" I asked. Her lips thinned. He didn't say. Inside, Ashford Hall felt less like a home and more like a museum curated by ghosts. Sunlight filtered through stained windows, splashing colors across the marble floors. Every wall bore portraits, faces stern, painted with the precision of another era. I caught glimpses of distant relatives I barely remembered from family gatherings. Each seemed to watch me with faint disapproval, as though wondering how I'd wandered into their lineage. We passed through a long corridor lined with bookshelves stretching to the ceiling. The smell of old paper and varnish hung heavy in the air. Blackwell paused at a set of oak doors. "This was his study," he said. "He asked that you hear his message here." I stepped inside. The room was dim, lit only by a fireplace whose embers glowed faintly. At the center stood a massive mahogany desk, cleared except for a single laptop. Blackwell approached it, pressing a key. The screen flickered to life, and then, there he was, Reginald Ashford. Even in death, he seemed larger than life, tall, gaunt, with eyes that burned bright despite the frailty of his frame. His voice carried a calm authority, softened by age but sharpened by conviction. "Ethan," he began, his gaze steady as though he could see me through the screen. "If you're watching this, then my time has ended, and yours has truly begun." I felt my throat tighten. "I've watched your life from afar," he continued, "not with judgment, but with understanding. I know the world took from you what you didn't deserve to lose. I know the cruelty of false blame. I know because I've lived it." He leaned forward slightly, his fingers clasped on the desk. "You wonder why I've chosen you? The answer is simple. You are my last living relative who has not traded conscience for convenience. The others, they sold their integrity for comfort. You lost everything and still kept your soul, even when you doubted its worth." I stood frozen, the room silent except for the crackle of fire. "However," he went on, "I do not believe in unearned fortune. To inherit my estate, you must fulfill a task, a calling, if you will. You must help 100 people rebuild their lives after ruin. Real help, not handouts. Lift them as you wish someone had lifted you." My pulse quickened. "You will have access to all my assets, staff, and resources. But if you fail, abandon, or corrupt this mission, everything will be transferred to the alternate beneficiary. Lydia Ellis." The sound of her name hit me like a punch. "Consider this your second chance, Ethan. The world broke you. Now it's your turn to mend what's broken in others. Prove that loss can be transformed into grace." He paused, his face softening. "You see, I too once lived on the streets. After the Vietnam War, I wandered for years, angry, hollow, forgotten. I was saved by a man named Samuel Ward, a doctor who gave me food, shelter, and dignity when I had none." My breath caught. "My grandfather." "Yes," Reginald said on the recording, almost as if he'd heard me. "Your grandfather never asked for repayment. So I offer this legacy in his name, not to settle a debt, but to continue a lineage of mercy." The video ended there. The screen went dark, reflecting only the firelight and my stunned face. Blackwell closed the laptop quietly. Mr. Ashford believed redemption was a gift that must be earned. His lawyers and trustees will assist you, but only you can fulfill the condition. I sank into the nearest chair, the weight of it all pressing down. $53 million, tied not to greed, but to purpose. 100 lives. 100 chances to give what I'd once lost. What if I fail? I asked softly. Blackwell's voice was steady. Then Lydia Ellis inherits everything. I stared into the dying fire, its glow reflected off the brass compass in my pocket, the needle trembling. Maybe this was madness. Or maybe, for the first time in years, it was meaning. I closed my eyes and whispered, "All right, Reginald. Let's see if I'm worth the second chance you think I am." For days after the will reading, I couldn't sleep inside Ashford Hall. The house was too quiet, too large. Every creak sounded like someone whispering my name. I'd spent years listening to the steady roar of traffic beneath a bridge. Now silence pressed against me like a weight I didn't know how to lift. Blackwell handled the legal details with the precision of a surgeon. Accounts were transferred, trustees assembled, papers signed. My name, Dr. Ethan Michael Ward, began appearing on documents worth more than I could comprehend. It didn't feel real. Sometimes I caught myself checking my reflection in the mirror, just to confirm I hadn't imagined it all. Mrs. Havers showed me through the estate's offices, rooms filled with art, ledgers, and records of the charities Ashford had once funded. He wanted you to continue his legacy, she said. But he wanted it done differently. Personally. Personally. That word stayed with me. A week later, I sat across from Blackwell in the study as he outlined the trust conditions once more. The terms are clear, he said. You must use the estate's resources to help 100 individuals rebuild their lives, authentically. Documentation must be maintained, verifiable outcomes confirmed. There's no deadline, but if progress stalls for more than a year, the trustees will review your eligibility. 100 lives, I murmured. He made it sound like redemption could be measured in numbers. Perhaps it can be, he said. But I wasn't thinking about numbers. I was thinking about Jonas, about the people under the bridge who'd given me more humanity than any courtroom or hospital ever had. That night, I stood at one of the tall windows overlooking Central Park. Below, the city glowed like a constellation. I thought of my grandfather, of how his quiet kindness had changed a man's life without ever seeking recognition. I thought of Reginald Ashford, a man redeemed by that act, now passing the torch. Maybe that was the point. Redemption wasn't a single act, it was a relay. So, I made a decision. The next morning, I called Blackwell. I'm going back to Boston, I said. He hesitated. May I ask why? Because that's where it started. That's where the people who need help are. He simply said, then let me arrange transport. 2 weeks later, the old St. Matthew's Hospital in Roxbury reopened under a new name, the Ward Foundation. The building had been abandoned for years, crumbling walls, cracked windows, the faint smell of mold. But it was perfect. I didn't want marble floors or glass towers. I wanted something that could be rebuilt, just like me. I spent the first week working alongside contractors, repainting walls, clearing debris. The sound of hammers and saws was like a heartbeat returning. When the doors finally opened, the sign above the entrance read, The Ward Foundation, restoring lives one at a time. My first hire was obvious. I found Jonas near the same bridge where we'd last spoken. He was sitting by the fire barrel, the brass compass in his hand. Told you I'd find my way back, I said. He looked up, squinting. You clean up good, document. Almost didn't recognize you. I've got an offer for you, I said, grinning. No suits, no speeches. Just a job. He frowned. Doing what? Helping people like us. He stared at me for a long time, then nodded slowly. All right. But if we're doing this, we do it right. No pity projects. Deal. We set up a modest staff, social workers, volunteers, med students who believed in second chances. Our first case came from a shelter downtown. A woman named Rita Morales, 32, a single mother of 2 who'd been evicted after a rent dispute. I met her in the foundation's lobby. She looked tired but proud, clutching a folder of unpaid bills. I don't want charity, she said. I just want a chance to start again. Her words struck something deep inside me. We helped her settle the back rent, connected her with counseling, and arranged a job at a local bakery through one of Ashford's old contacts. 3 months later, she sent me a photograph of her and her kids outside their new apartment. On the back, she'd written, "Thank you for seeing me, not my failure." That night, Jonas and I sat in the office, the city lights flickering through the windows. He poured 2 cups of coffee, real coffee this time, not instant. 1 down, 99 to go, he said with a crooked smile. I laughed quietly. You keeping score now? Someone's got to. Otherwise, how will you know when you're done saving the world? I'm not saving the world, I said. Just trying to pay back a debt that isn't even mine. He leaned back in his chair. Maybe it is. Maybe it's every man's debt, to pass on the kindness that kept him alive. I looked at the brass compass sitting on my desk. The needle glinted faintly in the lamplight, always pointing north. For the first time in years, I felt steady. Not happy exactly, but purposeful, like I'd finally stopped running from my own shadow. When I locked up that night, I paused at the door and whispered to the empty hall, "All right, Reginald. Let's see what comes next." The words echoed softly in the dark, carrying upward through the building like a promise. And for the first time since the day my life collapsed, I didn't feel like a ghost anymore. The Ward Foundation grew faster than I expected. Word spread through shelters, hospitals, and halfway houses. Whispers of a doctor who once lived on the streets, now helping others crawl back from the edge. Donations started arriving, unprompted. A journalist from the Boston Globe wrote a feature, calling me the homeless doctor turned healer. I hated the title, but it drew attention. And with it came people, dozens of them, desperate, hopeful, skeptical. We built programs for job training, medical care, addiction recovery. Jonas became our anchor, the one who could speak to the broken without pity. "They don't need your sympathy, Doc," he told me once. "They need to know someone believes they can make it." By the end of the first year, we'd helped over 30 people. I started keeping a journal, not for the trustees or the estate, but for myself. Each name, each story, a reminder that this second chance wasn't just about me. Then, one morning, everything stopped. It was a Thursday, and the foundation was buzzing as usual, volunteers setting up breakfast, caseworkers in meetings. I was reviewing medical files when my assistant, Mara, appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "There's someone here to see you," she said. She won't give her last name, but she says it's urgent. I sighed. "Tell her I'll." "She says she's your wife." The pen slipped from my hand. When I stepped into the lobby, time folded in on itself. Lydia stood by the front desk, wrapped in a beige coat that had seen better days. Her hair was shorter, her face thinner, but her eyes, those same green eyes that once looked at me with warmth, now carried exhaustion and shame. "Ethan," she said softly. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I'd imagined this encounter 100 times, anger, bitterness, maybe satisfaction. But standing there, I felt only disbelief. "What are you doing here?" I didn't know where else to go. I gestured toward my office. She followed quietly, heels clicking against the old tile floor. When the door shut behind us, the noise of the foundation faded, leaving a silence heavy enough to drown in. She sat across from me, fingers trembling as she unbuttoned her coat. "Graham left," she said finally. "Took everything. The house, the savings, the car." "Sorry to hear that," I said, though my tone betrayed no sympathy. "I'm not asking for money," she added quickly. I need a job. Something to get me back on my feet." I leaned back, studying her. The woman who'd once accused me of ruining her life now sat before me, the ruin written in her face. "You could have gone anywhere," I said. "Why here?" "Because I knew you wouldn't turn me away." Her voice cracked. "Not after everything you built." That stung more than it should have. For a long time, I said nothing. The memory of our final argument, her shouting, the packed suitcase, the slam of the door, played behind my eyes. I'd buried that night under layers of exhaustion and grief, but now it surfaced, raw and uninvited. Finally, I said, "You're right. I won't turn you away. But I'm not giving you a position out of pity. You'll start where everyone else does." She nodded, tears brimming. "I'll do anything." "There's a place downtown," I said, pulling a form from the drawer. "They're short on clerical staff. I'll refer you. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work." Her lips trembled. "Thank you." I handed her the paper. Our fingers brushed, just briefly, and I saw the faint glimmer of the woman I used to love, buried beneath the mistakes. For a moment, we were both silent, two ghosts acknowledging what they'd once been. As she stood to leave, she hesitated at the door. "You've changed," she said quietly. "So have you," I replied. After she left, I sat at my desk, staring at the empty doorway. Jonas found me like that an hour later. "You look like you've seen the past walk through your door," he said. "I have," I murmured. He nodded slowly. "You gonna let it stay?" "No," I said. "But I'm not sending it away hungry either." He smiled faintly. "That's what makes you different, document. You still see the person under the wreckage." That night, I walked through the quiet halls of the foundation. Each office light flickered softly against the dark, the air filled with the faint scent of cleaning supplies and hope. I thought of Lydia, of how easily love can turn into something unrecognizable, and of how forgiveness doesn't erase the scars, it just stops them from bleeding. Before leaving, I glanced at the brass compass on my desk. The needle shimmered under the lamp, unwavering. I realized then that direction wasn't always about moving forward. Sometimes it meant knowing when to stand still, when to face what you'd once run from. I didn't know if Lydia would last at that job, or if she'd even want to. But for the first time, I didn't need to know. Her story was no longer mine to fix. I locked the office and stepped into the night. The city hummed around me, alive, restless, unending. And somewhere in that rhythm, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. It was a gray November morning when I heard her voice again, softer, older, but unmistakable. Dad. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. I hadn't heard my daughter's voice in nearly 3 years. The silence between us had become its own geography, miles of misunderstanding and betrayal. When Lydia left, she took Sophie with her, and in the messy aftermath of the lawsuit and the scandal, I became the villain in my daughter's eyes. Now, that single word, Dad, cracked something open in me. Sophie. I whispered. I read about you, she said. Her voice trembled slightly, the way it used to when she'd call me after a bad day at school. The article, the foundation, the people you're helping. I wanted to see if it was really you. It's me, I said. My throat felt dry. I'm still here. There was a pause, then a soft laugh. You sound different. So do you. She told me she was living in Cambridge now, studying psychology at Boston University. I tried to keep my voice steady, but pride crept through the cracks. That's amazing, I said. Your mother never mentioned. She doesn't know I called, Sophie interrupted. She wouldn't approve. She still blames you. Yeah, I said quietly. So do a lot of people. Another pause. Then she asked, can I visit? Just once. When she arrived the next day, I barely recognized her. Gone was the shy teenager who used to shadow me around the clinic, pretending to take notes. She'd grown into herself, confident, composed, carrying the kind of light that both comforts and humbles you. We sat in my office at the foundation, awkward at first. The space between us was thick with unsaid things. Finally, she looked around and said, it's strange, you know. I used to hate this city. I thought it took you from me. But now I see what you've built here. I smiled faintly. It didn't happen overnight. Took a lot of mistakes to get here. She reached across the desk, her fingers brushing the old brass compass. You kept this. Always, I said. Reminds me where home is, even when I forget. Sophie turned the compass slowly in her hand, the needle trembling, but sure. Can I help? Help. With the foundation. I want to volunteer. You could use someone who knows how to listen, right? Her tone was half teasing, half hopeful. I didn't hesitate. You can start tomorrow. That was how it began. The slow, quiet rebuilding of something I thought was gone forever. Sophie spent weekends organizing supply drives, helping the outreach team deliver meals to shelters, sitting with the homeless youth who came through our doors. Watching her work was like watching sunlight move through dust, gentle, unassuming, but impossible to ignore. One afternoon, I found her in the cafeteria talking with Rita, our first success story. The two of them laughed over coffee like old friends. For a moment, I stood in the doorway, unseen, feeling an ache I hadn't felt since she was a child, the ache of belonging. Over the next few months, the foundation transformed. With Sophie's help, we began new programs, youth mentorship, addiction counseling, medical outreach. She had a way of drawing people in, making them believe in themselves. Even Jonas, who treated sentiment like a disease, called her the kid with fire in her veins. By the end of the third year, we'd helped 89 people rebuild their lives. Some found steady work, others reconnected with family. A few relapsed or disappeared, and those hurt the most. But Jonas reminded me that redemption isn't a straight line. You can't drag someone out of darkness, Doc, he said once. You just hold the light until they decide to follow it. Sometimes I caught Sophie studying me when she thought I wasn't looking. The faint worry in her eyes when I worked too late. The unspoken question of whether I'd really forgiven myself. I didn't have the answer, Maybe I never would. Then one snowy evening, as we closed up the office, she said, "You know, I used to hate you for what happened." "I know," I said. "I thought you ruined everything. But now I think maybe it had to happen this way, for you to become this version of yourself. The one who doesn't give up on people." Her words settled deep in me, heavier than any praise. "I gave up once," I said. "It nearly killed me. I can't do it again." She smiled, that same crooked smile her mother used to have. "Then don't." As she left, I stayed by the window, watching the snow fall over the city. The lights blurred, soft and golden. For the first time, I understood what Ashford had meant about redemption. It wasn't about fixing others to atone for yourself. It was about creating something that outlives your mistakes. That night, I added a new line to my journal. Number 90, Sophie Ward, found her way back. It felt right, because helping her wasn't charity. It was coming full circle. And as I turned off the lamp and the room fell into darkness, I realized that mercy, once given, never truly dies. It just finds new hands to carry it forward. It was a quiet afternoon in late spring when Edward Blackwell returned. I hadn't seen him in over a year. The foundation had grown into something far beyond my imagination. 3 buildings, dozens of volunteers, partnerships with clinics and universities. But when I saw him standing in the doorway of my office, that same charcoal overcoat and unreadable gaze, it felt as if no time had passed at all. "Mr. Blackwell," I said, rising to shake his hand. "You look exactly the same." He smiled faintly. "And you, Dr. Ward, look nothing like the man I found digging through a dumpster." I laughed softly. "I'll take that as progress." He placed a leather-bound book on my desk, worn and faded, its spine cracked with age. "I came to deliver this. It belonged to Reginald Ashford." I brushed my fingers over the cover. The texture was rough, the initials R.A. embossed in gold, nearly rubbed away. "A journal." "Yes." He instructed that it be given to you when the foundation had reached a certain stage. His words were, "When Ethan learns to build, not to atone." That phrase hit me like a jolt. "What does that mean?" "Perhaps you'll find out," he said. He wanted you to read it privately. After he left, I sat in silence for a long time before opening the journal. The pages smelled of dust and tobacco, the ink brown by time. The first entry was dated 1974, a year after the Vietnam War ended. "New York feels colder than the jungle. I have money in my pocket, but no reason to spend it. The world moved on without me. I can't sleep without seeing fire." The next page was smeared, the handwriting jagged. "I met a man today. Said his name was Samuel Ward. He found me behind a church, half drunk, half dead. He didn't ask what I'd done or what I'd lost. Just said, 'You look hungry.' That's all. No sermon, no questions. He took me home, gave me soup and a bed. I slept for 2 days. When I woke up, I cried for the first time since the war. I froze. Samuel Ward. My grandfather. He never mentioned his family. Said life is heavy enough without carrying names. He told me that kindness only matters when no one's watching. I believe him. I think he saved me." My hands shook as I turned the pages. Each entry painted a portrait of a man clawing his way back to humanity, working odd jobs, getting sober, learning to live again. And through it all, Samuel's presence lingered, a quiet guardian who never sought credit. Then came the final entry, dated decades later. "If I die before I can thank him, then let his kindness echo through his bloodline. Find the one who still listens to conscience when the world turns cruel. Give him everything I have. Let him understand that salvation is not a gift, but a duty repaid across generations." The ink bled slightly at the edges, as if from a tear that had fallen while he wrote. I closed the book, my eyes burning. The office around me blurred. For years, I believed my family history ended in tragedy and loss. My father's distance, my mother's disappointment, my own fall from grace. But now I saw the thread that connected us, a single act of compassion, passed down like a hidden inheritance. Ashford hadn't just left me his fortune. He'd left me my grandfather's legacy. That night, I told Jonas about the journal. He listened quietly, his rough hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. "So the old man knew your grandfather," he said finally. "Guess the world's smaller than we think." "Smaller," I said, "and maybe kinder than we deserve." He nodded. "You gonna tell Sophie?" "Eventually. She should know where it started." I looked at the compass on my desk, Jonas's gift, the needle steady as ever. For the first time, I realized it wasn't just pointing north. It was pointing home, not to a place, but to an idea. The next morning, I added a new entry to my own journal. The debt was never about money. It was about mercy. My grandfather saved a broken man, who then saved me, who now tries to save others. Maybe this is what legacy really means, not blood or property, but continuity of grace. That day, a new family came to the foundation, a father and son who'd lost everything to medical bills. As I listened to their story, I felt something shift inside me. The fear that used to live behind my ribs was gone, replaced by a calm certainty. I finally understood what Ashford had meant by earning what's given. You don't earn it through perfection. You earn it by using it well. When I returned to my office that evening, I placed Ashford's journal beside the compass. Two relics from two men who had once been lost, and who, through kindness, found each other. As I turned off the lights, the reflection of the city shimmered across the window pane. Somewhere beyond it, lives were still unraveling, waiting for a chance. And I thought, maybe this is how salvation travels. One broken soul at a time, mended by the hands of another. 5 years after the day I first stepped into Ashford Hall, the foundation celebrated its 100th success story. I remember standing backstage in a borrowed suit, the same brass compass in my pocket, waiting for my turn to speak. The auditorium buzzed with voices, volunteers, donors, families we'd helped, and strangers drawn by curiosity. Somewhere near the front row sat Sophie, her notebook open, her eyes bright with pride. Jonas was the one who insisted on hosting a public celebration. "You need to show them what's possible," he'd said. "People forget too fast. They need to see what change looks like." So here we were, in the same city that had once swallowed me whole, now gathered to witness something I never thought I'd live to see. Jonas took the stage first. The lights caught his silver hair, the deep lines etched into his face like the map of a hard-lived life. When he spoke, his voice carried the same rough warmth that had once pulled me through the cold nights under the bridge. "I used to think a man only gets one fire in his life," he said, smiling faintly. "You know, one blaze that burns him clean or leaves him ash. But this place proved me wrong. Turns out you can light 100 fires if you've got enough heart to keep striking the flint." The crowd laughed softly, but many had tears in their eyes. Behind him, a slideshow flickered, before and after photos of the people we'd helped. Faces once haunted now filled with color. Rita and her kids, now thriving. A recovering veteran running his own carpentry shop. A young woman once addicted, now training as a nurse. Each image a pulse of life reclaimed. When it was my turn to speak, my hands trembled. I wasn't used to microphones or stages. My world had always been smaller, one person at a time. But as I looked out over that sea of faces, I realized that the ripple had become a wave. 5 years ago, I was sleeping under a bridge on the edge of this city. I thought my story was over. Then a man I barely remembered left me a gift I didn't understand. Not money, but a challenge. To help 100 people rebuild after ruin. I paused, scanning the crowd until my eyes found Sophie. She smiled, that quiet, knowing smile that reminded me so much of her mother, only warmer. "Today," I continued, "we've reached that number. But I've learned something along the way. You can't measure mercy in statistics. Every person we've helped has given something back: faith, courage, forgiveness. The truth is, I didn't save 100 lives. They saved mine 100 times over." The room fell silent, and for a moment I heard nothing but the faint hum of the lights above. Then applause began, hesitant at first, then rising like rain on rooftops. Jonas clapped the loudest, his grin wide and unguarded. After the ceremony, I walked alone through the halls of the foundation. The noise faded behind me, replaced by the soft echoes of footsteps and memory. Every corner of that building held a story, a life pieced back together. Sophie found me by the window, overlooking the city. "You did it," she said. "No," I corrected her gently. "We did." She leaned her head on my shoulder. Grandpa would have been proud. That night, I couldn't sleep. Instead, I returned to Ashford Hall, my quiet sanctuary and reminder of where it all began. Mrs. Havers had long retired, but the place was still cared for, preserved like a relic of purpose. Dust floated in the moonlight as I walked through the grand corridor, the portraits of ancestors staring down with softened judgment. In the study, I found something I hadn't noticed before, a photograph tucked behind a row of books. It showed two men standing shoulder to shoulder, one younger, stern-faced in a doctor's coat, and the other smiling faintly, a faint scar tracing his cheek. My grandfather and Reginald Ashford, taken sometime in the 1970s. I stared at it for a long time, the reality of it sinking in. Two men connected by a single act of kindness, one feeding the other changing the world for the next generation. A circle complete. I placed the photo on my desk beside the compass and Ashford's journal. The brass needle quivered briefly, then steadied, pointing north as always. Jonas stopped by the next morning before I returned to Boston. "You know, Doc," he said, "most people would have taken that money and vanished. You turned it into a map for the rest of us." I smiled. "You gave me the compass. I just followed where it pointed." He laughed, that low, gravelly sound I'd come to love. "Then keep following it. Maybe it's not done leading you yet." As I left Ashford Hall, the city stretched before me, vast, imperfect, alive. The sun rose over Central Park, scattering gold across the rooftops. I could almost hear Reginald's voice. "Help them as you wish someone had helped you." Back in Boston, the foundation buzzed with new plans. Sophie was applying to graduate school in social work, determined to expand our outreach. Jonas was mentoring younger volunteers. And me, I sat at my desk, pen hovering over my journal, writing one last line for the day. The 100 is done. But mercy doesn't end at numbers. Time to help the next 100. I closed the book, feeling the warmth of the morning light on my hands. Wealth, I finally understood, isn't measured in what you keep, but in how many lives you lift from the ground. And as the city outside came alive again, I whispered to the empty room, "All right, Reginald. I'm still listening." The compass needle trembled, then stilled. And in that stillness, I knew the circle had returned to its beginning.